Alright, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup. From last time, I was showing you how that transmission just wasn't going to fit in there at all with the way, how much floor that I had cut out. And you see I cut out a lot now. So there's a big old hole left in there, and this is wobbly as all get up. Like, it is gnarly. But as I said last time, I got all of the cab mounts in place. That's all bolted down and secure. When I got to cutting it, no weird popping or groaning or anything that was too sketchy. So I think that it hasn't really moved much, which is good, even though, I had to cut that big old support piece out of there that runs right down the middle of the cab. Even when I cut that out, it didn't hardly move around, which is good. So, alright, so I got that on the dolly with the transmission jack on there, so I was able to move it up and down, get it supported. Got it strapped. You can see it even bolted the transmission to the back of the engine. I don't have a clutch or flywheel or anything in there to make it a lot easier to move it around. And you can see, like, my final position there. I mean, that valve cover is deep up underneath the firewall. So I mean, it is in there. But like I said, I tested with my my spark plug socket. I can change that final spark plug back there, and this is pretty much where it's got to be. Like, I don't have any choice. So based on, like, I see I put my seat in there, and that shifter position and the height of the engine and everything else, like, that's where shit's got to go. Like, I'd like it to be a bit farther forward. I'd like it to be a bit higher, but can't. So I ran my board across there, and as I said before, this hook that's on this side is sort of the top part of the engine, and I got maybe like a 3/4 of an inch of clearance right here, and so it can't really go any higher. It can't go any more further forward because of where the radiator sits. The notch that I did inside of the cross members doing its job, it allowed me to bring it as far forward as I did, because the way the oil pan sets in there, it sits down in this groove that the notch that I cut inside the cross member. So that was definitely necessary. Looking at stuff, I mean, you can see that the level, it's not quite level right now. That's actually okay. I got one of my motor mounts bolted on this side, and so it's sort of cockeying the engine a little bit that way. But I need to do that in order to get a bit of clearance on this side. When I put the motor mount on the other side, I'll push it back the other direction, and then that'll get me the pan clearance I need. Right now, there's like maybe a 1/4 inch of pan clearance to the notch. By shifting it this way and then shifting it back the other way, it'll gain me more like 3/8 or something, which should be fine. I got a couple of boards up underneath the transmission pan. Not sure if you could see that, in order to make sure I got clearance on that side as well. So now I'm working on the actual mounts. So I showed you I ordered these on eBay. They're just like a universal mount that's drilled for this bolt pattern. There's no real wiggle room. So, like, where the oil pump and filter and distribution lines and everything are at, like that, there's no room in there. This other set of holes on this side, I don't know what those are for, but the mount doesn't fit to those holes. I could do something insane, like try to cut it down or whatever in order to shift it, but there's hardly any wiggle room at all inside of that space. I did throw the rack on, so just briefly I threw the rack on in order to make sure that where the stub shaft of the rack sticks out, that the motor mounts are not going to be in the way, and they're going to clear. It's low enough to where it should clear just fine. It's going to be tight in there though. Like this section's going to be sketchy to get all that stuff, in there working right. So working on the motor mounts on this side, standard stuff, just getting a piece of cardboard, fitting it up in there, and then just nibbling away. So this angle, I'll start out with, a 90 that is, right in the middle. But, the way this has to sit in there, it might not exactly be 90. So I just start with a 90 and then just nibble away with the scissors until this looks good. And then after this looks good, then end up getting on a piece of, I don't know, I think that's like 3/8 or something. It's a big old chunk. So these are what I'm using for the motor mounts. The kit came with them, but they weren't long enough. So it came with these. The material I'm using is the same thickness. You see that these are belled out at the bottom a little bit more, which I would have liked to use these, but they're not even close to long enough. I mean, they're probably like 2 inches short, and so they're definitely not going to work. I should have told the guy that I needed longer ones, but my bad. So I had, just other scrap flat bar laying around, so I'm using these. The plan is, after I get both of those in, I'll end up taking, just like what I showed you on the cross member, where I boxed it in with some 16 gauge. That's what I'll end up doing. And so after I get both of the pieces in, everything tacked, everything supported, looking good, then I'll, just box in that top portion of the motor mounts, and that'll sort of, give me that lateral stiffness. Like, you see that this is notched on the bottom, and so when this sets in there, it'll be welded along the top edge, and it'll be sitting on the top of the frame and the side of the frame. And so as far as like in this direction, as far as weight going straight down, it'll be super strong, but it won't really have a lot of rigidity to the side. And so, yes, it's a thick piece of metal. Yes, it'll be welded to the frame, but as far as like lateral rigidity, it will, the only thing that's holding it in place will be the weld that's on the notch, which isn't real good. And so by boxing it in all the way around, just like I was telling you before with like putting a back on a bookcase or a dresser, when you box in, these sort of long pieces, you gain a ton of lateral rigidity. I'll also, when I do it, I'll run the box all the way down to the frame, and I'll actually be able to get a bead of weld all along here. It'll sort of help tie in the arms and everything, so I think that'll be a good plan for making sure those fit. Just working on this side right now. The other thing that I did is, you can see, like, the engine's set back a little bit. It's not totally level. So if we put our gauge on there, we got 3 degrees running downhill, and that's for setting the pinion angle. And so, drive shafts don't want to be totally flat. They don't, the U-joints need a little bit of angle on them. From looking around, 3 degrees seemed to be what most people said was a good, starting point for stuff. It seems like it's going to be fine for my application. I look down, looking at the end of the tail shaft here on the transmission, through the back of the tunnel, heading towards the rear end. 3 degrees seems like it'll clear the remainder of the tunnel, that I won't have to cut anything else out, that should be fine with 3 degrees down. I was looking at the rear end of the vehicle and seeing that, like, hey, if I were to drop the rear end position down, and then you have to match that 3 degrees going the other direction. So, if the transmission's headed downhill 3 degrees, then the pinion angle of the rear end has to be up 3 degrees in order to meet it. And as far as like that positioning, looks like it should be fine. So that's what I had to work on. That took a long time to like get all the shims up underneath it, and using the transmission jack and setting the angle on all that stuff is super tedious. moving the engine up and down and everything in order to get, it level left to right, make sure it's not twisted in the frame, make sure it's right down the middle of the center of the vehicle, pointed directly to the rear end. Like, that was super tedious. I mean, that was pretty much all day yesterday, like taking the engine in and out and the transmission and bolted and everything. So, like, super time consuming in order to get those angles right, but it seems like it's in a good place now. I definitely had to take all that time because there's not really any angle adjustment with the motor mounts. And so the length of these motor mounts will determine the angle. So if this is a little bit longer, it's going to push up this side of the engine and it's going to change the angle. It also sort of sets the angle left and right. And so the left and right angle, again, based on the notch that's cut on the bottom of this, is going to set the angle. So, while the engine position fore and aft with the slots inside of the motor mount, there's a little bit of movement there. But as far as all the engine angles, the mount itself sets those angles. So, super tedious, super time consuming, but it looks like it's in a pretty good place. I got to get all that stuff tacked in, supported, looking good on the engine side. And then after I get the engine side done, then you can see the transmission motor mount, the transmission mount right here on the back. I'll have to fabricate that as well. So once I get this all stabilized and in a place to where it's nice and stiff and working correctly, then I would be able to, get the truck up in the air. So I might work it on the ground and work on the transmission mount. So pretty tedious process here. After I get all this stuff tacked in and the engine not moving, like I would like to bolt some accessories and stuff on it, but if I'm over here bolting all these things on and I'm just sitting on some wood and shims and stuff in order to get my angles right, what I don't want to have happen is I'm fiddling around with all that crap. It shifts and moves and all the pain in the ass in order to get it flat and level. I gotta just redo it all. So I'm gonna try to get the motor mounts tacked in, bolted in, get the engine stable, and then I'll go through and my big old mess of parts that I have over there, I'll bolt all that crap to the engine and, get a sense for how horrible of a clearance I got, because my guess is it's going to be bad. Like on this side, on the intake side here, there's a plate for the injectors that sit, and then there's another intake manifold that sits on top of it. And so, you can see where the bolt comes. Like, this sucker comes all the way out here. Like, all that is definitely going to have to go. There's some piping and crap that runs on the back side of the engine, which means even more stuff is going to be on that side of the firewall. But I need to get this stabilized before I get into any of that stuff. So, yeah, it's coming along. It's just super slow, honestly, in order to get through all these measurements and angles and all that other stuff. The other thing that I had to do, so I did order a timing set and a water pump, and it don't look like this water pump at all. Like, it looks completely different. I think this is a replacement water pump for a 2JZ, so this is a 1JZ. And it's got all these extra provisions for stuff, like these hoses. I looked at my pictures from when I first got the engine. This didn't go to anything, and then this banjo fitting didn't go to anything either. So I actually have no idea what these things hooked into. I saw some things online with like the, cooling system for like the throttle body and stuff, that like there are potentially some coolant lines that run over to the intake manifold and stuff, but these were just wide open. There were no hoses for either one of these fittings. And then this isn't clipped to anything. So this is a sensor, looks like some sort of like temperature sensor or something. And And so, like, my water pump that I ordered don't look anything like that at all. And then the pulley for it also doesn't fit. And so, had to order, you know, a whole new pulley set. It needed a new serpentine belt anyway. Hilariously, like, I could have just ordered only a water pump pulley that fits the one that I have, and it was like $80. But then I could get like an entire pulley set with the serpentine belt for like 160. So I just ordered all that. So yeah, just slowly, like, you know, as I get through here, find more crap that I got to end up addressing. But, you know, it's coming along. It's been super slow to try to get to this point, but hopefully if I can get both of the motor mounts squared away, more of the stuff cut and bolted on and everything, I can kind of get this stabilized in a spot that it's going to stay, and then, you know, get to filling in that big old hole that I made. So, all right, so I'm not going to bother to record fabricating this one. I mean, it's a whole bunch of tediousness to get that cut out, the little notch, and then, you know, grinding it and fitting it and grinding it and fitting it and all that stuff. So you see me do all those things with the sheet metal panels. It's the same process for the flat bar, but it just takes longer because it's thicker. So, all right, I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.